What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 14 NFL Power Rankings show. It's taken a while, I think, to adjust to this very crazy NFL season. You know, we've gotten so used to over the years that by the time we get to Week 14, it certainly feels like some teams have kind of pulled ahead and categorized themselves as that top tier team, while as some of the other teams that were trying to be those types of teams have shown their own ass by this point in the season. Well, for the most part this season, at some point, everybody's kind of shown their own ass. The league is more wide open than it's ever been, and it's been a uniquely chaotic season to really reshape your mind to adjust to. And that makes doing videos like this, trying to rank these teams, discuss where they're at and what they're going to be like moving forward, just so much fun. I really am enjoying the daylights out of this season. I hope you guys are too, and I hope you enjoy this video as we get into it. So if you do, please do take a second to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel as well if you're not. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. As always, at the very bottom tier, my booty tier, which is actually tier 4 this week. I only have 4 tiers due to that conversation we had to kick off the video. But at number 32, the Raiders. Just a horrible football team, man. Nobody on Max Crosby on that defense can make a play, and this offense, what did they have, 25 rushing yards this week with Ashton Ginty, the offensive line, a complete train wreck. This is the worst team in football right now. And then at number 31, the Tennessee Titans. After a few weeks of looking slightly more competitive, they go back to reminding us just how bad they are, as they do continue to hold the worst record in the league. It is going to be fun to look back on that Cardinals game if the Titans do lose out, because that was a historic, wild close to that game with a series of random events that let them get their only win on the season. But as far as where the Titans are at right now, I mean, you can't already be a bad team and then have so many just miscommunications, pre-snap penalties, mental mistakes. It's just week after week with this team as they, try to tread water through the rest of the year. And then the New Orleans Saints at number 30, they did fight back against Miami here. Not that that's too much to write home about, but they continue on a weekly basis to be a loosely competitive team. I think Tyler Shuck, just like a lot of rookie quarterbacks, you kind of take the good with the bad as we continue to try to evaluate him. But then at number 29, the Cleveland Browns. It's just such a shame they are wasting one of the all-time great defensive seasons from an individual player we've ever seen, with Myles Garrett, who still might find a way to win and should find a way to win Defensive Player of the Year on a 3-9 football team now. But not only do they not have the offensive support for their defense, they now have shown multiple weeks where the special teams is a colossal disaster. They spot the Niners about 14 points in this game, like they did to the Jets a few weeks ago. And with the way that they are offensively, they just aren't going to be a team that's in a spot to win games like that. So they got to clean up the special teams, I guess, on top of everything else. Then at number 28, the New York Giants. Feel like this week against the Patriots, I mean, talk about crazy bad special teams performances. That was one of the worst I've ever seen. You get the big return to start the game. You allow the punt return touchdown. You slip and botch a field goal. You get decked on a kick return on what, in my opinion, probably should be a penalty. I understand by rule it maybe wasn't, but there needs to be a law of a guy's a defenseless player when he's held up like that. He fumbled that football. It was Gunnar Olszewski. He fumbles it because he gets essentially knocked out for a split second with a hit to the head. But for the special teams, that's another turnover there. So, they're doing what they can on both sides of the ball as they go through the rest of the season. They're not an easy out, but they're going to, out themselves with special teams performances like that. But that rounds out our very bottom tier. We now jump up to tier 3. Now the Frisky tier, and a couple of teams that were previously in my booty tier, showing some fight at the end of the year, maybe not such easy outs, finding themselves in this Frisky tier. And that's going to start with the Washington Commanders. Now, a big part of this, too, is guys getting back healthy. Terry McLaurin, such a big impact to that offense. Probably their best overall player, maybe not named Laramie Tunsil right now. And also, Jaden Daniels might be back as early as this week. If that happens, this could realistically be a high 20s caliber team. And then defensively, Dan Quinn taking over the play calling duties, showing some more fight with the defense this week, basically all the way till the end when the defense just got entirely gassed. But yeah, Washington a +1 and climbing up a tier here for whatever that's worth. And then the New York Jets. This is probably a bigger deal for a team that I think the season is now officially going how you could have hoped with Aaron Glenn coming in, where the defense does settle down and start to figure itself out, especially in a season where you traded away your two best players in Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner. It's good to see them be more competitive on Aaron Glenn's side of the ball, unlike they were to start the season. But we do give defensive coaches grace on this channel to get a half a season to figure out your players, make those adjustments, and get guys to settle into what you want to do. And I think we're seeing largely that with the Jets, with a defense that still has plenty of room to add talent with those draft picks, and the offense just so much more competent with Tyrod Taylor in there at quarterback. You have a good offensive line. And then these wide receiver additions, we've seen John Mechie show up in recent weeks. This week, Adonai Mitchell, with all that talent, had the best game of his career. So the Jets just hitting some green lights, getting some feel-good vibes coming out of this season. And then the Minnesota Vikings, not a whole lot of feel-good vibes here for this team. They get just embarrassed in Seattle. Max, Nosemer throws what's going to go down as one of the more hilarious pick sixes of the year, on top of, Jesus, how many picks did he end up with in this game? I turned it off with about 6 minutes left, even though it was only like 26-0. At least, I mean, honestly, I haven't checked the final score of this game. That's, I think, what it was when I turned it off after the Tariq Woolen interception. But yeah, the Vikings just obviously have the biggest quarterback question that any team has as we head into this offseason. It's been discussed very much in depth. You know, both of my shows last week, whether you caught the How It Started versus How It's Going show last week, which if you haven't, I encourage you check it out. It's still all very relevant content, you know, taking a look at, you know, the assessment of what we thought of these teams heading in and where they're at right now and what they got to do moving forward. Definitely one of my favorite shows of the year. So if you haven't watched that yet, do go check it out. But also in my Saturday night live stream podcast, we spent a lot of time talking about the Vikings and some of their options this offseason as well. So it's all out there, and not just on this channel. A lot of people talking about the Vikings and their quarterback situation. But I mean, the defenses, there's a reason that game was only 26-0, despite the offense being, you know, having one of the worst days of offense we'll see from a team this season. Brian Flores in that defense can cook up some stuff, and I do think they made Sam Darnold uncomfortable. And Dallas Turner deserves a shout-out. He is, I think the light has come on for the former first-round pick from last year as well. So it's not all bad for the Vikings, but at least offensively, got to get the QB figured out. And, you know, Kevin O'Connell, I think there's been some, you're not talking about, you know, hot seat or anything like that, but I think he should look himself in the mirror this offseason too and ask, you know, am I doing enough to cater to the players that I have? Am I being a little bit stubborn to run what I run? That can be an issue for some coaches, being a little bit stubborn in that sense. And I also just think loading up the tape of other teams and getting a little more creative with their run game would do wonders for the Vikings as well. But yeah, they fall down 4, and their season has been over now for multiple weeks, as they are, I guess, a frisky team because of the defense. This is still a team that did beat the Lions within the last month, but I mean, let's be real. It's not a good football team. Then we have the Arizona Cardinals, who in the most predictable manner imaginable lose by a field goal and fall short on a potential game-winning drive opportunity against the Bucs. I mean, that is where the Cardinals are at. They're going to have to find a way. I mean, they have their own coach and quarterback questions to answer themselves, but they're gonna, you know, have to have some conversations too about, like, why the hell can this team? Why are they so incompetent when it comes to winning close games? And maybe it's just bad luck, but it feels like it's a little bit more of an existential issue with the Cardinals. But then the Falcons at number 23, they maintain this spot They obviously lost to the Jets. You could argue the Jets should rank ahead of the Falcons. If you want to argue that with the head-to-head thing, that's fine. The Falcons have shown some other moments of highs throughout the season. I think also getting Drake London back, hopefully this week, does make them a much better football team. That is by far their best player. Can also point to some special teams gaffes this week that helped them lose a tight game there against the Jets. I still think they're the better overall football team. It was also in New York in bad conditions. But besides, splitting hairs with the power rankings, the Falcons are in a bad spot. They're giving their first round pick to the Rams that keeps becoming a higher and higher pick. They have a coaching staff you don't believe in. They have a front office that you should not believe in, and major quarterback questions. And they just aren't a good football team. Obviously, they lost to the Jets this week. And then the Miami Dolphins at number 22, maintaining this spot. They climbed to 5-7. And they play the Jets this week. They could climb to 6-7. And everybody under the age of 16 just stood up and started shouting. But I don't know if you're a Dolphins fan, how happy you are about that, as their pick is now creeping back into the teens all of a sudden. This is going to stop short once their schedule becomes more challenging. They survived the Saints this week. Good for you. Just like everybody else this year, you're not really going to go up when you beat the Saints. I don't really think any differently about this team, even if they're stringing together some wins. The beauty is I think Dolphins fans are smart enough to know, these are empty wins, and I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of Dolphins fans asking to be going up in the power rankings, especially when they are, to me, pretty clearly the top of this Frisky tier. Once we get to our next team, we kind of enter a different category of NFL teams. But before we do that, I do want to thank the sponsor for today's power rankings. Guys, we are not just in the heat of the NFL playoff races if you want to go cheer on your favorite NFL team, but we've also got basketball, NHL. It's a good time to be a sports fan, and you should go check out a ball game. Go have some fun. And when you do it, SeatGeek has got you covered. There are a lot of ticketing app options out there, and SeatGeek is king for a reason. They have the best user-friendly interface that will give you images of exactly what your seats are going to look like. So if you're looking at a new section of your favorite stadium or a stadium you've never been to, you know exactly what you're going to be getting with those seats. When you're browsing the seats, they color code every single option based on value. So just look for the green dots. You know you're getting the most bang for your buck, not just within the options on the SeatGeek app, but they consistently have the most market competitive prices as well, in my experience. Around here, whenever I'm looking for Twins tickets, go to a Vikings game, a concert, you name it, I check out the other options, but I always find myself back with my friends at SeatGeek. And on top of all that, right now, if you use code TFG10 at checkout, you will save up to $20 on your next purchase as well. That's code TFG10. And most importantly, I hope you have a fantastic time heading wherever it might be. But now as we head into week 14, this tier, the playoff fringe tier, actually becomes tier 2 in the rankings, whereas I think all season it has been tier 3. And we've got 7 teams in this tier, a bunch of teams that are pretty week to week, that have some things you like, that have some holes, and all teams as well that are in the playoff hunt right now. And that's going to start, in my opinion, with the worst of these teams, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are really in a dangerous spot right now. An old, expensive defense that just refuses to play well consistently after a little bit of a hot stretch there in the mid chunk of the season, but the last couple weeks they can't seem to get off the field. They have major problems over the middle of their defense. Uncharacteristically, this has been a defense you can run the football on. I mean, the Bills just asserted their will on this defense in Pittsburgh, no less. And that's just not something we've gone accustomed to seeing with a Steelers defense. And then offensively, obviously, Rodgers wasn't playing amazing to begin with, but now he's dealing with injuries, getting banged up as the season goes on. He's played some really bad football this week. The Chargers game, that's starting to stack up with an offense that, when they can keep things in the certain game script, the run game, play action script. They have some weapons to attack you with, but if they get from behind, this team is just, they don't have the juice, the firepower to keep pace. And this defense is unfortunately not helping things. So they do fall down 3 spots. They are still tied for first place in the AFC North and have a chance to get in. In any given week, if they can stay in that script and do some of the stuff that I said does work and have that D-line show up, which some weeks they do, it feels like some weeks they don't, they can be a tough out some weeks, but I do think in terms of all of the teams whose season is still alive, this is the worst one. And then the Baltimore Ravens, staying in that AFC North here with the number 20 spot. They fall down 10 spots in my rankings, down a tier. And I just got to hold my hand up and be like, I kind of, I think dismissed that, yes, they were winning games as they've bounced back from a 1-5 start. But I've done a bad job pointing out that this team has still shown some issues in those wins against some pretty bad opponents. And, I've never said they were all the way back or anything, but putting them up at number 10, I think that was as high as they got, maybe number 9 the week before that. But, basically saying they're mostly back, but maybe not all the way back as the team that I did pick to win the Super Bowl this year. I did come into the year with them ranked inside the top 4 spots or whatever. I did a pretty bad job, I think, pointing out that the offensive line is not playing as well as they did last year. Lamar has not looked like Lamar this year. I think there's something going on injury-wise that's also impacting his confidence. He looked horrible against a Bengals defense that, let's just say, hasn't put the fear of God in anybody in about 3 years, let alone this season. That was like the worst NFL game I think I've ever seen from Lamar, like rookie season included. So they're just in a tough spot. The offense feels just overall broken. Somehow they can't seem to get Zay Flowers going, who should be one of the easier receivers to get some touches to. Derrick Henry in the run game is extremely boom or bust right now. It's a mess, and this is just not a good football team right now. And I think this fall is, it is what it is. It's justified and all of that. But I think this was more from my perspective. I just had this team ranked too high and gave them too much benefit of the doubt from what we've seen from them in the last 2 years. We saw them last year start slow and heat up and were a legitimately great team by season's end. I thought this was heading in that direction. It's not. They don't have a pass rush either. That needs to be mentioned. The defense doesn't have a fear factor to them. So they are a remarkably mid football team. It really does come down to that. And when Lamar isn't able to play like an MVP quarterback and elevate that situation, you're just left with, I think, the 20th best team in the league. So a big drop for the Ravens this week. And then, hell, man, I know they have the worst record out of this group, but I think with what they did on Thursday night, with how these other 2 teams are playing, with Joe Burrow returning this week, I think I have to say the Bengals are the best team in the AFC North right now. Now, it's obviously tight margins here. I think these 3 teams back to back to back make sense, but that was a blowout win on Thursday night. And I think, obviously, Joe Burrow coming back, anytime any team gets a all-pro quarterback back, they're going to climb back up in the rankings and vice versa, which led to the Bengals falling so far. Granted, Flacco had some good games in there, but anybody that watched the Bengals the last 3 weeks, you weren't getting that great play from Joe Flacco anyway. So great to see Joe Burrow back and Joe Burrow back. The throws he made on Thursday night, it was a very special performance from Joe Burrow, like seriously. And I broke that down on Saturday's podcast as well, where we recapped all those Thanksgiving and the Black Friday games. If you want to go check that show out, it's in the live stream feed here on YouTube, or you can go check out the Fully Inflated Football podcast. So we dove into all the different throws he made, what was so special about it. But that's a big part of me showing some faith in the Bengals here. But also what the defense did, right? They get, Miles Murphy has a nice game. You've got Joseph Asai has a career game. The secondary has some guys, right? DJ Turner is legit having an all-pro season, in my opinion. Dax Hill had a good night. Even got to sneak some love into Jalen Davis, of all people. But, we're not expecting the Bengals defense to be a superpower or anything like that, but they've got some pieces on that defense that can make plays for you. And then just like we said with Aaron Glenn's defense and a lot of other defensive coordinators over the years, Al Golden, now through the midway point of his season, understanding what he's got to work with, maybe that defense is settling down at least a little bit. And as long as the Bengals aren't giving up 28 points a week, they're going to get T. Higgins back. We've seen Joe Burrow come back now. You know what Jamar Chase is capable of. If you're looking at the AFC North, the Bengals offense is clearly the best unit in the division, outside of maybe Cleveland's defense, but Cleveland's obviously further out of the picture here for other reasons. That might be enough to say the Bengals are the best team. Now, can they get it done? I think they have like a 9% chance of making the playoffs here. They're going to need to win their interdivision games remaining and get some breaks otherwise, I think. But it's pretty wild that it's not that far-fetched that they could do this thing. Very reminiscent of last year, but to an even more, I think, desperate degree. But definitely some love as the Bengals climb up and climb up out of that Frisky tier and into the playoff fringe. Welcome back, Joe Burrow. We missed you. Other than Ravens and Steelers fans, we missed you. Then we got the Carolina Panthers at number 18. The most frustrating team in the NFL this year to try and rank, and the most frustrating team maybe ever in the history, the 7-year history of me doing these weekly power rankings. Who the hell is this team, man? I tweeted it out, but this team is the Dumb and Dumber meme, and it applies to Bryce Young as well. He's, kind of ties all of this together. It's not just him, but the Dumb and Dumber clip of just when I thought you couldn't get any stupider, you go and totally redeem yourself. That's been the Panthers week to week. It's just wild, the roller coaster that this team has been. But man, just legit showing up and beating a Rams team that last week I had put the Rams in a tier of their own. I really thought like they were the class of the NFL, and I think everybody else did. Like, how could you really not say the Rams were almost clearly the best team in the NFL and the most complete team in the NFL, and yet the Panthers, without J.C. Horn, maybe the best player on their football team, they go toe-to-toe with the Rams, and they win a really hard-fought back-and-forth football game, showing a ton of character, the toughness to run the football, Bryce Young's ability to just bounce back when he has a bad game. It's so impressive. On top of his clutch factor, there are large-scale macro conversations you can have about Bryce Young and his future. The one thing he deserves an incredible amount of credit for, he is clutch as hell. If this team is within striking distance and he can smell victory, he is legit nails, dude. Anybody that's watched close Panthers games can tell you that. It's really impressive. And, he just finds ways to rid himself of his weaknesses in some of these big fourth down moments where he does beat the blitz and he throws these precision passes over the middle of the field. He can extend plays like the T-Mac play where you get that Alabama Bryce Young. We saw this in a big win against the Eagles late last, or an attempt to beat the Eagles last year. The Eagles ended up winning late. But God, if Bryce Young could just hone that guy in and play like that for 60 minutes, or I mean, he was good in this entire football game, but if you could just get that and consistency, this team would be so far in business. Now, I can't skyrocket this team up, right? We're still a couple weeks away from this team losing to the Saints, and going back a month ago, they just got obliterated by the Bills. They looked like one of the worst teams in the league in that game. Granted, Bryce was out that week, but you weren't all that competitive against San Francisco, despite your defense giving you every opportunity to try to win that game. They've had such low lows, right? And I feel like this game is a start of being able to trust this team a little bit more, but I'm not quite ready to make that leap, but they are out of that Frisky tier. They are into that playoff fringe. This is a great week to be a Panthers fan. The biggest win they've had, since since they went to the Super Bowl with Cam Newton. Maybe. I mean, maybe there's some other ones in there that I'm forgetting, but just overall, like, no matter how this goes, I think you look at the Panthers, who the front office is doing a great job. This roster was in such a bad spot surrounding, this overall regime coming in after the Bryce Young trade. And, you're seeing some pieces on defense really starting to step up. You're seeing them make value moves, like getting a 4th-round pick for Jonathan Mingo and Adam Thielen each. You're finding guys later in the draft making value free agent additions like Mike Jackson, who's been sweet, and obviously Rico Dowdle, you name it. So you're just so happy that the Panthers are in good hands, that they're developing on the course of the season. If you look at the season on a macro scale, this has been a successful year for the Panthers. And then we'll see. I mean, obviously, when they're on, they're a tough team to beat. They've beaten some really good squads this year, Green Bay and now the Rams. There's no reason, if they can't take this as a getting over the hump type of week, that they can't go toe-to-toe with the Bucs, who are coming up in just a few teams here in these rankings. But great week for the Panthers. The +2 might not satisfy Panthers fans, but the reality is we're starting to hit that point that becomes a bit of a roadblock in terms of climbing up the rankings, because a lot of these teams, this is something the Bears have dealt with for the last few weeks in this 17-10 range. A lot of these teams keep winning. And one of those teams is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have really had kind of a fun season at this point. They had the tremendous 4-1 start. I made the video about them. Sorry, Jags fans, I probably cursed you. And they go on and lose like 3 or 4 straight games. I think 4 out of 5 games. And it was like, yeah, they peaked early. This team has a long way to go. But in recent weeks, they have refound that identity from the start of the season, which is running the piss out of the football and playing tough defense. And then I would say this week, granted it was against the Titans, I think this was Trevor Lawrence's most complete game. Really efficiently attacking the middle of the field, actually like hitting his receivers in stride. You can see the difference that makes, not just with the receivers not dropping the football because they're easier catches, being on target. The Jags had just 1 drop this week, and it was Austin Trammell out there having to get targets, but their core players played great. But also not having those boneheaded mistakes. If Trevor can, I know it's the Titans, and this has been the big if on Trevor, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that, yes, this has largely been Trevor's career, and I think that matters, but it's also important to acknowledge that this is week, we're only a little over halfway through Trevor in this system that is very different, schematically speaking, being more of that Shanahan style system that does like to target the middle of the field. That's a pretty vast departure from what Doug Peterson's overall system was. So if he's starting to settle in, be more comfortable, throw the ball with more confidence, and now the receivers are also playing well, not at a historic rate of drops. This week was just the 3rd game of the season that Brian Thomas didn't have a drop. I think the addition of Jacoby Myers has actually been way better than I really thought it was going to be. I just didn't see him stepping in and making a big impact, but it's just felt like such a great fit with him in this offense, and the idea of him back with Brian Thomas, hopefully playing better moving forward, and Travis Hunter coming back next year with Brenton Strange, that can get you really excited with this running back duo. So you're starting to get some stuff to get really excited about for the Jags, but if this offense can pass the ball, not at an amazing level, but just at an average level, and not have so many stupid mistakes and random misfires, this could be a team that I would say sneaks into our top tier that we're going to have to talk about here as a team. It's going to be a really tough out. And we saw them earlier this year, right? Like, they've had some impressive games. Most notably that Chiefs win, but they did beat the Texans earlier this year as well. But let's go to our number 16 team here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They take care of business. They survived the comeback effort from the Cardinals. I think it was good to see Bucky Irving get back out there. Chris Godwin especially, I thought, looked fast and ready to be that impact complement to Emeka Egbuka. He did have a drop in the end zone, but he'll shake that off, maybe a little rust, I don't know, but he did look healthy and back, and that's huge. We know what Chris Godwin is when healthy. So good week for the Bucs. Not anything major to take away, as they certainly weren't dominant against the Cardinals. They're not like through the woods or anything like that, but as they continue to get some guys back healthy, maybe Mike Evans soon, this team could absolutely become more of a dangerous team moving forward. And like we said with the Jags, find themselves climbing up a tier before long. I'm just not quite ready to forget about the ugliness we saw from this team over the last month and make that jump quite yet. But then we have the Los Angeles Chargers at number 15. They ended up taking care of the Raiders handedly, though it was a little shaky to start. Herbert, he's been able to kind of avoid even bringing it up because of the O-line issues. And, it's this week, you're still playing the Raiders. They win anyway. We saw one of the more head-scratching interceptions I've ever seen from him against the Steelers in a game they win. I think it was the Titans game. Didn't he throw like a pick six or something? But like all these games they're winning anyway. But there have been like after that really hot start where it was like, oh my God, Herbert's finally like reaching his elite quarterback potential and playing like an MVP QB. I think we can at least mention like, well, he's cooled off a little bit. Some of the mistakes are starting to pile up. And he had another really ugly interception this week against the Raiders. But other than that, I mean, what else is there to say? You beat a horrible Raiders team. You're not going to get a ton of credit. But beyond that, I just, in a game against the Raiders, I just don't have too much to add here. They are dropping a spot as one of these other teams has just really impressed me in a way that, the Chargers, I wouldn't necessarily, they've impressed me, but there is something impressive about continuing to win games with their tackle injuries and a relative lack of talent defensively. That is a big reason why they find themselves at 15 here. I just don't really trust this defense to hold up against legitimate playoff caliber offenses. That's a big reason why they find themselves around this 15 spot. But big shout out Kamani Vidal. The dude is freaking awesome. I'm bummed that he's going to have to go back to an RB2 role because I think he's a starting back in the league. And these receivers are really freaking nice, man. Really fun to see Quentin Johnston make some plays this week. All these guys keep stepping up with that group. So I don't want it to be all negative with the Chargers. It's just as what tends to happen when you beat one of the worst teams in the NFL. It's hard to impress in those weeks and move up in the rankings. And that's not just a Chargers thing. That applies to every team. But then at number 14, these San Francisco 49ers just do remind me a lot of this Chargers team where they're incredibly well coached. They raise the floor with their defense, but it's a defense that I don't really trust against any real offense. And they're a team that can certainly get their place offensively, right? So these two California teams really tightly knit, but ultimately getting a win in Cleveland on a day that the special teams really stole the show. I don't have really any newfound opinions on the Niners. It's just there's one other team that has impressed and jumped up to the next tier. But that is going to wrap up our playoff fringe category. And then this is where it gets fun. And we come back to that intro that I had on today's episode about how the NFL's wide open. There are not a clear cut, not even a single clear cut, like tier one football team. Everybody at some point either has questions, whether it's a certain side of the ball or a quarterback that you may or may not trust, or a team that has had some games where they show their ass against inferior opponents. Every team in this category, in this now top tier of the NFL, this is the new NFL in 2025. Anybody in this group, at this point, with where I'm at with this season, I could actually see winning the Super Bowl. And that's crazy to say that we have 13 teams that I would say that about, but it's just where we're at. This season is awesome. And how fitting that the first of those teams is the Kansas City Chiefs. That, of course, could I see the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl this year? Yeah, I still could. Are they going to get into the playoffs? That's a bigger question, and they have to find a way to do the thing that they did seemingly every week last year, and that is win close games and put teams away. And right now, I think, number one, they have an identity crisis on offense. Everybody's telling them, you need to run the ball more. And then at the trade deadline, they decide, Yeah, we'd give a fourth round pick for Breece Hall, but a third round pick, no, that's too much. That to me feels like a mistake that could define this team's season for a front office that honestly deserves some criticism with how they've drafted and tried to replenish the talent on this roster over the last few years. I'll say it. But they've leaned a little more into the run in recent weeks, but it's just not an explosive run game. Watching Kareem Hunt go for 4 yards a time, and then it just feels like they get bored, and you end up with Mahomes launching the ball to these 3 speed receivers that they've crafted the majority of their receiver room out of, really outside of Rashee Rice, who continues to average like 5 yards a target, 5 yards average depth of target, basically getting treated as a short game only item of their offense. But it feels like they get bored and then launch these deep shots to these receivers that either don't get as open as you think they would for being such fast receivers, aren't able to come down with tough catches because that's not really any of these guys' games, or Mahomes just sails a deep throw because let's face it, Mahomes is not an accurate, well, he's not a high level accuracy deep ball thrower. It's just not his biggest strength at this stage in his career. Once upon a time it was, but feels like every other time he sends the ball downfield, he's overthrown his guys. That leaves you with an identity crisis on offense, and it's up to Mahomes and Andy Reid to figure that thing out down the stretch here. I think they can do it, but it's easier said than done, even for those guys. I mean, the defense just doesn't have a fear factor, right? If you're not getting a Steve Spagnuolo master class, which they weren't able to get on 3 days of preparation before they played the Cowboys, or if you don't get Chris Jones to like take over a game, which this year he just hasn't really been able to do that as often as he once did, you're just left with a beatable defense, a solid but beatable defense. So it's not a great football team. This team has earned all of the benefit of the doubt, and they still have good wins this year for sure. They beat the Colts, the Lions. They're 7th in the NFL in point differential. I still don't think we should dismiss this Chiefs team, but obviously, yeah, they should be, I think, at this point, the bottom of this category, and they can hardly afford another loss. Like maybe 10-7 gets them in, but even then, they're going to be playing with fire. With like they don't have the tiebreaker against the Jags, for example. So, going to be interesting to see how these final 5 weeks go. But then at number 12, the team we keep hinting at that has passed up some of these other teams and jumped into this tier, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, just like the Chiefs, the team that they just beat this week, they are going to need to continue to win, and they're going to need even some help from other teams to climb up into the playoffs, because even if they beat Detroit here on Thursday night, which is going to be such a fun game, such a meaningful game, even then they would still be the 8th seed on the outside looking in. So that's where the NFC is at right now. But as far as power ranking a football team and talking about how good this team is, and for the sake of this conversation, if they get in, could they actually go on a run and take down legitimate Super Bowl contending teams consistently? Yeah. I mean, why the hell couldn't this team do it? They've done it the last 2 weeks against the Eagles and the Chiefs. The defense, it hasn't just settled down as a solid unit. I think this is like a legitimately at least above average, if not good defense. I mean, the D-line gets after it. They've got guys in the secondary that can make plays. You've got some speed returning at linebacker and DeMarvion Overshown, and some leadership in Logan Wilson. Everything they've done to repair this defense is so impressive. And then, yeah, I mean, you've got this offense with everything we've talked about with Dak and CeeDee and, of course, George Pickens. Like, this team, when everything's clicking, is legitimately one of the better ones in the NFL. So we'll see what they can do Thursday night. It's another major test against Detroit. And then the schedule really lightens up after that. So I think a lot of teams are looking at this, and it's not like you want to play the Lions either, but I think you're probably saying, you know, if you're a team like Seattle or the Rams, the Eagles in this division, Packers, Bears, all these teams vying for their own division, you're looking at how the Cowboys are playing right now, and you're like, I would not really want to play those guys right now. They're kind of getting hot and healthy at the right time. But then I have the Indianapolis Colts, who are kind of in the opposite direction here. They're falling down too, and I'm starting to wonder if we should talk about this as a team that actually could go and win the Super Bowl. The biggest thing in their favor is the AFC is pretty bad. a lot of these teams in this tier are NFC teams. 8 of them versus 5 in the AFC. But number one, injuries are starting to pile up. Sauce Gardner is going to miss a few weeks. They say he's going to be back for the playoffs, that it's not a season-ending injury, but dude, we're in week 14. And that was a pretty major looking lower leg injury, which is everything for a corner for the most part. So that scares me. Daniel Jones dealing with a lower body injury that's a little bit interesting. He was slowed down this week, and I do think his mobility is a big part of what they do. Now, I will say this loss against the Texans, I don't think you overreact to it too much. It was just one of the more sloppily officiated football games you'll ever see. Now, not every break went the Colts' way, but I think it was lopsided in the Texans' favor down the stretch. And it was a very tight game that still could have gone either way in the end. Obviously, this team with Alec Pierce playing the way he's playing, you've got Jonathan Taylor, a great offensive line, great coaching. There's still so much to like. But you're starting to see some plot holes with the offense, I think, surrounding Daniel Jones and everything that surrounds his overall narrative. And then the defense is beatable, in my opinion. So they're certainly not a perfect team, but that applies to a lot of teams at the top here. How they respond in upcoming games is going to be everything in terms of if they can hold on to their placement inside what is right now our top tier. They don't have an easy game left on the schedule, though. It's at Jacksonville, at Seattle, the Niners, Jags again, and Texans. Unfortunately, one of the knocks on the Colts is they have a lot of Mickey Mouse wins on the season. They were dominant wins, but against bad teams. And right now, if you look at their resume, that Week 2 win against Denver is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and this team feels pretty far removed from that version of this Colts team. So it's not going in the right direction for Indy, but they still ranking ahead of teams like Dallas and Kansas City, and even getting a nod that some of those teams in the bottom tier like LA and San Francisco didn't get. That there's still an upside that we've seen with this team that does get you excited. So I don't want us to be all negative about the Colts. But it's not going in the right direction, to say the least. And then at number 10, the Houston Texans. And this definitely is a team that the AFC is looking at and just begging someone to beat and knock them out of the AFC, because I can promise you, nobody wants to play this defense. I know that the Bills don't, after what we saw this Texans team do to last week. We know that this Colts team that just lost to these guys doesn't want to see this defense again. Unfortunately, they're going to have to in Week 18. I don't think Bo Nix's Broncos and a young Drake May and that Patriots team want to see this group either. When you look at the landscape of the AFC, why not the Houston Texans, man? Because they have settled down offensively. They really have. They're not a great offense, but you don't need to be when you have a legitimate championship caliber defense. That's what this Texans team is at. Think of the 2015 Broncos. Peyton Manning got that team like 15 points a game, and they still were able to do it. This defense reminds me so much of that no-fly zone Broncos defense, with 2 elite pass rushers, a great defensive coach, an awesome secondary, linebackers that fly around and hit. It's a special unit. And then, yeah, like I said, offensively, like Woody Marks has been way better than I thought he would be. He's running with a lot of toughness. I thought he would just be a scat back. He's clearly more than that. He brings some juice to the run game. You've got them able to get these young wide receivers going. The O-line is settled down. It's not like this absolute, like, unstoppable train wreck on the O-line. They're not good, but they're not, the worst in the league. Or even if they're the worst in the league, they're not by far the worst in the league like they were to start the year. And you add C.J. Stroud back into the mix, that, despite an ugly interception this week, still played pretty damn well in his first game back. Texans are scary and on the rise here as they get into the top 10 now. Then we have at number 9, the Detroit Lions. I mean, Thursday night is just so big for this Lions team, and how this looks against a Cowboys team that I think has what they have to take advantage of their interior O-line issues. You thought for a second Frank Ragnow was going to come back out of retirement and save their issues on the O-line, but he didn't clear his physical. He's not coming back. So rip that narrative. Amon-Ra St. Brown got beat up last week. I don't know if he's going to be able to give it a go, but it's not, the Lions feel a lot like the Chiefs. Like, if they get in, can they beat anybody? When the Lions are on, they are one of the best teams in the NFL, no doubt in my mind. But they've just dropped too many tight games and are putting themselves in trouble right now. So we'll see where this thing goes. But it's a -4 for them this week, down to the number 9 spot. Not how this year was supposed to go for Detroit. Then at number 8, the Philadelphia Eagles as well, falling in tandem with last year's juggernaut Lions. The Eagles fall to 8-4. And man, if they're not careful, the Cowboys could make this division interesting. Because the Eagles are showing that they're playing at a level where they can lose to anybody with how they're showing up. And it goes right back to that 2023 season where this team, they lost the locker room. And all the offensive issues and how bad Jalen Hurts was in this game against Chicago and has looked at points in this season, that's a very, relevant but tired narrative. We know that's something that this team has been dealing with, the inconsistencies on offense. But for that defense to come out and look like they just didn't care and just get boat raced by the Bears' offensive line and their run game, that is not supposed to be a part of this team's identity, and that's really concerning. The hope is it was just a weird day, on a Friday afternoon on a short week against a team that maybe they, as 7.5-point favorites in this game, just, overlooked. That's the hope, but man, we've also seen this locker room collapse, and they don't seem to have a ton of answers right now, especially on offense. So, yes, this team is remarkably talented, but they just feel beatable in a strange way right now. Definitely a fork in the roads week for the Eagles, I think, where they could fade away from relevancy from this season, or they could lock in, and we could very well get to week 18 and be like, yep, Eagles are still the best team in football. Like, that narrative, they put that to bed. There's still a path for them to do that, but it's got to get done. And then the team that embarrassed them on Black Friday, the Chicago Bears. And I've had my hesitancy with this team in these power rankings over the weeks. They hadn't beaten a winning team until last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had a bunch of close wins against lower ranking opponents, and I liked a lot of the stuff they were doing, but Bears fans wanted to get credit as a top 10 team. I got all those classic comments that I get every year in these rankings where the Bears just clinched the NFC and are heading to the Super Bowl, and TFG still has them ranked 16th. Well, that's not how these rankings work. We assess your resume, we assess the roster talent, and react as teams get better, and it's a process. And now the Bears, after what they've done the last 3 weeks, I think stacking on top of each other, their 3 most impressive wins on the season. Believe it or not, 3 weeks ago when they went into Minnesota and beat J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings, last second, that was their most impressive win on the season. Then the next week, they take care of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mason Rudolph and get their first win against a winning team. And then this week, this was the real statement from them. Really the first time in a while that they get an opportunity against a highly respected opponent, and they show up and they dominate. And the offensive line and all of the additions they made this offseason across the interior there, dominant. DeAndre Swift, credit where credit's due. That was the most north and south, hard-nosed running game I've seen from him in his career. And he's bought in to everything here. Plus his running mate now, Kyle Monungai. A dominant run game and a defense that, yeah, they've got some holes, right? But they're hungry and they smell blood, and they have some really opportunistic players on the back end that are showing that they're going to increase the probability that they're able to keep up this turnover dependent defense is really what they are. But when you have a guy like Nahshon Wright finding the football and making these incredible picks and stripping the ball out on a heads-up play on the tush push. And then you've got Kevin Byard, the savvy veteran safety that just finds his way into these throwing lanes. He's had some really heady interceptions this season. You can see a way that this team can still get maybe 1 or 2 picks a week. even if they're letting the opponent move the ball a little bit. So they're just hitting so many green lights with this football team. And that's before we even mentioned Caleb Williams, which this week wasn't really about Caleb. It wasn't. But every week doesn't have to be about Caleb Williams. He's overall playing better this year and has shown, I would say, in general, a 2 steps forward, 1 step back progress type of season this year, which is good. That is very good. So huge week for the Bears, the biggest Packers-Bears rivalry game since 2010 in the NFC Championship. Massive vibes, another big test for the Bears, who will face my number 6 ranked Green Bay Packers, and obviously the winner of this game will come out on top. But it was a big week for these Green Bay Packers as well, getting a big statement win in Detroit on Thanksgiving, and I think answering so many of the questions you have about this team. Oh, that the defense is questionable. You can run all over them. The Detroit Lions weren't able to do it in their own house on Thanksgiving. Huge shout out to Isaiah McDuffie flying around, making plays for that run defense, getting guys lined up and in the right spot, turning into a really nice leader of that defense. If I'm the Packers, Quay Walker coming back from injury, I say, sorry, buddy, I know you're not supposed to lose your job for injuries in this league, but you're LB3 now. Sorry. Have fun in free agency this offseason. You got beat out. We'll see what they do there. I think it's actually a big deal. I think McDuffie might be their best run defender on the entire defense, so I would not want to put him into an LB3 role. And then on the offensive side of things as well, they ran the ball really well this week against one of the best run defenses in the league against Detroit. Josh Jacobs looked healthier than he's looked all season. That was great to see. And then Jordan Love, an amazing game against Detroit, following up an outstanding game a couple weeks ago. Yes, against the Giants, but dude, if you watch that Packers game, the rest of this team tried to shit the bed, and Jordan Love put the team on his back and said, we got this. We're not going to lose this one. And this team playing down to their competition is a legitimate criticism and a big reason why they rank 6th in these power rankings. But I think Jordan Love is doing a really good job to silence a lot of the haters and give you reason to believe that this team should be taken a lot more seriously than maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. So big week for the Packers and just the biggest of games coming up. Cannot wait for Packers Bears. Then at number 5, the Denver Broncos. I tweeted this out, but Sunday night was just your typical dose of watching the Broncos and wondering if this is actually a really good football team. And then you contextualize it with the rest of the season. And just like I said, all these teams have had issues. And the Broncos, at least they know who they are. They consistently win close games. And they do that because of what their identity is. They're outstanding on both lines, offense and defense. You have an experienced head coach. You have a quarterback in Bo Nix that does have a clutch factor about him. And you got a defense that can close games when the game's on the line. Now, they tried to not close the game against the Commanders. Boneheaded mistake by Talanoa Hufanga, who feels like a highlight waiting to happen and then a back-breaking mistake waiting to happen on this defense. But overall, Nick Casabenito makes the play in the end, and Denver wins another one in overtime. Not always pretty. Basically never is. They've only won 2 games this year by more than a touchdown. But whether you're a good team or a bad team, they're going to drag you into their style of football game. And more often than not, they are comfortable in that game script and, have constructed this team in a way that they're prepared to come out on top more often than not. And basically they beat teams like the Jets and the Commanders and the Raiders in the same way that they beat the Eagles and the Chiefs. So I've got them at number 5. It feels like this isn't sustainable, but in the landscape of this NFL, who the hell knows? At least with this team, I know what I'm getting every week. And that's not necessarily something I can say about my number 4 ranked team here. But the Buffalo Bills, a team that I do see with more week-to-week upside and potential than the Broncos. So they are going to edge out Denver here. But it was an impressive week for these Bills as they climb up 3 spots and take this number 4 spot. It does largely feel to me like the Bills are going to be avoiding the 2025 exodus of NFL powerhouses, right? Teams like the Ravens and Chiefs in this division with the Bills have been such staples. The Bills, at least, while they're not as good as years past, if they were, they would be definitely number one in these rankings. But they still are mostly themselves. I do think the lack of an explosive passing game, they feel a little condensed offensively, and some defenses I do think can swarm them. And if you can stop this amazing run game that sometimes it's just that's enough, just Josh Allen plus James Cook, just taking over games like they did this week in Pittsburgh, which is really impressive. But there are weeks where if you can slow down the run and get after Josh, like, yeah, this offense has some holes. And defensively, they just kind of are what they are. They're an incredibly high floor, low ceiling defense that can really struggle to stop the run this year. I think the Bills have just become a very matchup dependent team. And honestly, their success in the playoffs might just hinge on who they meet. I think certain teams that run the ball at a really high level can give this team fits. And I think certain defenses like the Texans, as we saw, have the talent to take away a lot of the stuff that this Bills offense does. But overall, this is still an explosive, good Bills team that got a big win this week. But then sticking in the AFC East with your division-leading Patriots, who really dominate the Giants in a team effort. Now, if you didn't witness one of the worst special teams days that you'll ever see from the Giants, this game might have been a little bit closer like we saw from the Patriots against the Bengals last week. Just like all these teams, you can kind of pick some holes. Like, I still think the overall roster talent level of the Patriots isn't that of your typical Super Bowl contender, yet I've got them as my number one ranked team in the AFC, and they climbed to 11-2, and Drake May just continues to play like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, gained some ground back on Matthew Stafford in that MVP race this week. At the end of the day, this team has one of those quarterbacks, whether you would rank Drake May in his first season of playing at this level as an elite quarterback for your own like personal quarterback rankings or anything like that, I don't think you can argue that within the context of this season, he is playing at an elite level. Honestly, in a way that the other four elite quarterbacks haven't this year. Mahomes, Josh Allen have not consistently played at that level. Joe Burrow, Lamar dealing with some injuries. I don't even know if there's a legitimate argument at all against the idea that the Patriots have the best quarterback in the AFC right now. Could Allen and Mahomes turn it on in January like we know they're capable of, yo? Yeah, absolutely. But that's just the rising tide that has lifted all boats here in New England, along with Mike Vrabel and all the little different pockets of players that have stepped up this year for this incredibly impressive Patriots team. And this week it was special teams. But at number two, the Seattle Seahawks. This was going to be a tough week to decide who to rank number one. I think our last team, New England, is going to find themselves number one in some people's rankings after the Seahawks and Sam Darnold detonate his old team in Minnesota this week. I think some people might be putting Seattle number one. But I've got the Rams number one because they just beat the Seahawks a couple weeks ago. But it's a tough week to try to pick a number one. I'm going to go with Seattle at number two. And a part of this is I actually don't think the Seahawks offense played well at all against the Vikings defense. Darnold looked incredibly flustered in this game. The offensive line showed some issues, and we know on paper that Seahawks offensive line could give us some cause for concern. It just didn't matter at all because Zach Charbonnet had some big runs to kind of close this game out once the defense, I think, lost some of their motivation as the game went on. And it wasn't a fieldable offense with Max Brosmer and this Vikings defense, in large part because we know what the Seahawks defense is capable of. So they're going to stay put at number two. I still like the idea that this team has that kind of hive mind mentality. I've compared them to like a championship caliber basketball team where you can just feel like all 12 members of the team are able to step in and contribute and be synergetic. And I think this Seahawks team has a lot of that. So I still really like Seattle, but I'm gonna keep the Rams at number one despite losing to the Panthers. Now they are dropping out of their own tier that I had put them in last week. So in a way they're going down, showing some more issues this week. I think overall that watching that Panthers game, I didn't really walk away worried to many extents about the Rams. It was more just like, damn, Carolina showed up. I think a couple of very uncharacteristic Matthew Stafford turnovers with a strip sack fumble and probably the worst read he's made and will make all season, throwing a pick to Mike Jackson, which was also a great play by Mike Jackson. And then you have a pick down at the goal line that gets batted off a defender's helmet, popped up in the air and intercepted. That was the main difference in this game. And the Rams haven't given me any reason with how efficient they've been and how good Stafford's played to make me worry about them turning the football over, right? I think it was just one of those weeks against a team that brought it. I really don't feel that different about the Rams. I do think that the Panthers showed if you really commit to it, you can move this front around if you've got the right O-line and the power backs to do it. And this was the first week since, I think, the last time the Rams lost, right, against the Eagles, that Emmanuel Forbes did show up as an issue. Obviously has played well in recent weeks, but a really rough week. And maybe you've got a weak link on that defense. But I still think overall this is the most complete team in the NFL, and I'm not ready to drop them out of that number one ranking after this loss. It's never great to lose, but I just didn't feel the need to lower the Rams because of recency bias necessarily. We're still assessing these teams' overall talent level, their resume on the season, and I still like the Rams as number one, but it's certainly not with a bullet like it was last week. So very fun week for Power Rankings. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out if you did enjoy. Let me know your comments down below, where you agree, where you disagree with the rankings. And of course, make sure you subscribe. We got lots of NFL content heading your way. I really appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.